You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a more modern approach to selling, the application of virtual and hybrid selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. And welcome to today's episode of Sales Today, where I am delighted to be joined by Jamie Martin, who is the founder of Correct Careers Coaching. I got that right. I was stumbling over that when we practiced, but I got it nailed. Jamie, welcome.
Hi, Fred. Thank you for having me on the show and your podcast today. Appreciate it, and to provide some value to your audience, really.
No, I am sure you will, because I know what you're going to talk to me about because I've already read it.
I
Jamie
hope
and
so. I hope you've done your research before prospecting me.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is you appeared in the same book as me. The Jim put together, which was a real honor. And your chapter on psychology of sales, I absolutely loved. You know, I find psychology fascinating. And so I just thought, well, we need to chat about this and we need to put it out as an episode. So
Well, I'm excited to be here and discuss it further. And yes, and then get your intake on it. And actually, you could start by saying, why was it of interest to you specifically, the chapter?
Hang on a minute. Who asked the questions here? Is this some psychological?
It's reverse psychology.
Why do I find it so? Well, sales has got so much to do with psychology. There's so many different elements, and what I liked is the way that, I know in the chapter is quite short, you highlighted just a couple of these, and I thought, you know what, we can get a good 40-minute discussion out of taking those all a bit deeper. Yeah. So there's various kind of sections to this discussion, and one of the things that you do talk about is that psychology is an important part in standing out from your competition and building brand image. So yeah, talk to me about that.
Well, I think I'll just give it a bit of a background to why this topic is of interest to me. I've been quite heavily academic based. So psychology, I started in college, really enjoyed it. And actually the fascination of psychology, because I actually have sleep problems, and I'm sure many people do. So I actually got to do a sleep study in college, and I was like, this is really useful to apply into real life. Of course it is, because it's the study of an individual in person. But actually, when you really read and you know, understand information and apply it to your real life situations, it's fascinating. That's why storytelling is, you know, really big in retaining information, which we'll probably chat about later on anyway. So after that, I went and I did some sales. I did telemarketing for a Vodafone campaign. If you can sell a mobile phone, basically sell anything. I'm sure that's not exactly true. And then during my time doing sort of telemarketing, I went to university and I did 3 years of an undergraduate psychology degree and then a 4th year in business psychology. And, you know, I had been sort of asked by my parents, you know, why aren't you a psychologist? And I felt at that time, you know, 4 years was a good period of study for me. I'd learned a lot. There was so many different avenues you could go in psychology, you know, criminal psychology, etc. You know, I ended up going down the business route. And when I was doing business psychology, I really found it fascinating about individual differences in learning, communication, training, occupational psychology, psychometrics, you know, and then that sort of, you know, said to me, right, well, what do I really want to do? And because of my background in sales, after telemarketing, I went to do media sales, and then I had a 6-year sales career in recruitment, and recruitment being one of the hardest sales industries, because, you know, it is about long lasting relationships, building relationships with 2 different parties, and, you know, those parties, you know, not just being a product but actually having a voice. So it is really about understanding people's, their emotions, their buy-in, their communication styles, the way they think, the way they feel, everything, you know. And recruitment was a great career for me to be in anyway, because obviously like the psychology interest I had. So moving on from recruitment, I set up Correct Careers Coaching, predominantly, you know, career coaching, sales training business, because that aligned with my message of employee retention. After being in an employee turnover industry for so long, I wanted to focus on employee retention. And I felt it was, you know, career coaching, support, mentoring, engagement strategies, but also sales training and strategy, because that's what my experience is in. As I started doing my the years within my business, you know, I found that there was a lot of people interested not only just in learning different ways of selling, the full sales cycle. They needed a refresher in selling, and also working with the leaders of businesses and SMEs and corporates regarding sales process and strategy, which was really needed, to look at the customer buy-in journey. But more importantly, LinkedIn has taken quite a lot over my business, because I used to use that all the time in recruitment. And now I've, worked out my own way of utilizing it using a 10-step framework from connection to conversion. And a lot of that is by applying psychological methods, which we'll probably go through today. So my business model now is really looking at a sales and marketing consultant, LinkedIn training, but also have my own programs, the sales psychology, which I've created over many months of my sales experience and also my academic background, to put all this information together to train. It is more for people who've had some sales experience, so like elite professionals, and feel like they're a bit of a plateau, they can't, the glass ceiling, they can't take it any further. But I want to show them that they can, and then they can do it in a different way. So I hope that gives a bit of a summary of why there's the journey and the focus of this sales psychology. And to answer a question really about psychology and brands, well, I'm going to start with the famous quote by Tony Robbins: people who are like each other tend to like each other. And you've probably heard of KLT, know, like, and trust. That renowned term, and it does speak volumes. If you are like someone, if you build a common ground, if you understand their brand, their image, what their authenticity, then and it mirrors you, or you find a common ground with that, then you will want to work with them, or at least have a correspondence with them. And that's why it's important to go right back to the beginning of a business or any sales role. Think about, what are you going to be thought leadership in? What kind of messaging do you want to put across, especially on your social channels or digital channels, and LinkedIn being the business to business platform. And how do you want others to perceive you? But it's also looking at it in a different way. So I say to the customers I work with, so who's your ICP, your ideal customer profile or customer avatar? Okay, so we know a persona of an individual, maybe what they like, they don't like, what their characteristics are. Is your LinkedIn profile, for example, mirroring that customer? You could talk about you, but actually, if you're, say, for example, an extrovert and you mostly work with an introvert, or you work with a completely different level of personnel or industry sector, then how is your profile speaking to that person? That's why, with regard to brand, of course, you've got to think about colors, and color psychology is quite interesting, actually. The constant messaging you're putting out there, but it really is you can't speak to everyone. You can't cast your net too wide. You've got to focus on your niche and focus on who your customer is, and if your brand is speaking to your customer. What do you think about that, Fred?
No, so much in there. And yeah, you talk about thought leadership messaging, and you can't speak to anyone. And is it fair to say that's probably the mistake that many people make, in that, well, no, we can sell my stuff, anyone can use it, I'm going to sell to everyone, and you literally try and talk to everybody, but it ends up being heard by no one. Is that a fair summary of where people tend to go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it's a common mistake, but I don't think there's a harm in the occasional generic message. But I think in reality, like the principles of Robert Cialdini, you want to, the authority levels, you want to be an expert in your field. And the only way to really be an expert is, like we were talking about earlier, actually, is you stay in that lane, you stay in that topic sector, you preach that topic, and you have to then share that topic in your brand, in your messaging, and to speak to your customers.
And I think it is tough. I mean, you've gone through this, I've gone through this. That's what we were chatting about before, where you're saying, no, psychology, that's the stuff I do. And I can do other stuff. I've done it. I could trade it. I've got the program. Same with me. I'm like collaborative selling, collaborative, hybrid, because that's the next evolution of where collaborative is going. But can I do all the other things? I do sales management, because I do neg. Yeah, it's part of it. I'll pull it in. But as soon as you start saying I do all of these things, I think it's hard to maintain that credibility. That, well, really, you're good at all of that stuff.
It's interesting. I mean, people like to work with experts, like, in a specific industry sector. Of course, skills are transferable, but I think during the customer buying journey, you have to grab their attention, and our attention span as humans is actually quite low. On average, it's only 8 seconds attention span, which is 1 second lower than a goldfish, funny enough.
Is that true, though? Or is that just what people say? I thought it was the memory of a goldfish, anyway.
In an average attention span. Well, I mean, that's what Google says, but I'm sure it's got some controversial...
It's got to be true, then.
Yeah. we'll have to research this after this. But yeah, I mean, so our attention span is short. So yeah, you know, I think it's like a negotiation. Too many options actually kind of baffles the thought process of your decision making. And the reason is because, you know, generally speaking, we buy 90% based on emotions, 10% on rational logical thinking. So if you're emotional buyer and you're feeling that you're clouded by too many options or too much information by someone saying they can do everything, then it might be just easier just to go with one person who's an expert in one field and work with them, because then that they know that's a very kind of clear-cut answer. I think for the scenario of that one is, you know, I've got a range of skills. I'm sure you have as well. So it's working with a customer, a client on a certain topic area, building that trust, building that relationship and credibility, and then signposting to them, well, actually, you know, I can do other areas of work with you, and then incorporate and upsell to them and incorporate those other areas and work with them. And then you basically become their go-to business consultant, which is great for them because they've got a long-lasting relationship and they don't need to spend, you know, loads of different money in different places and, you know, going through all that process again. They've got one person to do that with. But again, if you're not an expert in every single, you know, in so many different areas, then yes, you need to make sure you are demonstrating what you're an expert in, and that comes across in your brand, in your social media marketing, etc. And you've got to kind of be specific about it, because as we both said, you can't speak to everyone. You know, you really need to understand who your customers are and start from there.
Yeah, and yeah, you become the expert in that. You might well do other stuff, which is slightly kind of still within your expertise, but not what you talk about. Or you'll know others, and you'll say, well, actually, yes, because of what I do, I concentrate on this area, but I have other contacts who do this. Now, I just need to rewind you a little bit. 90% emotion, 10% logic. I mean, I expect listeners have heard this said before, and if they've not, they're probably thinking, that's just not true in my industry, though. We're a very, very logical industry. It's all about rational decision making. Nah, not for me, mate. Tell us more about that. Where does that come from? What does that actually mean? Because it's easy to say, lots of people do throw that around, but what does it actually mean, that?
Yeah, I mean, that response could very well come from a C-suite, a C-level individual. Absolutely. Especially someone maybe who's strategically looking at figures, who are looking at, you know, forecasting and planning forecasts, you know, over the next few years. Of course, it would be based on evidence, based on a hypothesis. We were talking a bit of psychology in there, or based on logic. I absolutely understand that. But what I mean by emotional, I mean, there's two ways of looking at it from a business capacity. But let's start with the you know, pertinent one, i.e. customers. So if you could be strategic in, you know, okay, so say it was a service selling business, you know, what's our branding like? What digital channels are we using? Are we using a omni-channel or multi-channel approach? You know, who are our customers? You know, where are they located? What's their demographics or their bio? You know, you could do all of that research. You could get, you know, you could logically work out the cadence, so a sequence of actions and the sales touch points to convert new business. I get all that, absolutely. And that's what I work with my customers. But what you've got to think about is the customer's perspective and what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and their emotions to buy in. And that's what it's about. So so if you were looking at, say, a sales rep or SDR, they call them in America, or, you know, anyone really in sales, customer facing sort of sales, and they're working with a customer. Well, what they've got to think about is actually their approach isn't going to work on everyone. Some people may prefer to correspond differently. I mean, or some people may prefer to communicate at different days and times of the week or in a different way. I'll just give you a couple of examples. One of my clients refers more to WhatsApp. So I use WhatsApp when I contact him. One person I can only get in contact with at Wednesday about 3:45 p.m, which is why I call him every Wednesday at 3:45 p.m. to get hold of him. So, but that's only from trialing and testing with different customers, what works for them. So communication is absolutely key. And also bearing in mind, when you talk about, say, communication styles, NLP, for example, so visual, auditory, kinesthetic, people learn and you know communicate in better in different ways. And even like by the language, if you talk about NLP, I'm not an expert in it at all, but I know you can say certain things about language which resonates with people more than others. So if we know that everyone obviously has individual differences, which is obvious, and that's what psychology is basically the theory of the, the topic of researching, then we know that we do need to adjust our approach every time we're talking to someone new. Because if it's someone at a different level, like a different decision maker level, they could be the buyer, they could be the one who gathers the information, they could be the one who signs the check. They will all have different motives, different criteria they're looking for when they purchase something. If it's talking about contacting someone in a specific industry sector, then they may have some terminology that they use that you need to either learn or at least communicate with, so they have a better understanding if you can become an expert in working for them. That's what I mean by emotional buy-in. You really got to, basically, that discussion on, you go with your gut, you go with how you feel. It is like that. If you meet someone for the first time, a lot of the times I've actually won business because of my energy, as you could probably tell, and my mindset, because, some skills are transferable and people will like to work with certain mindsets of individuals, maybe because they've got similar traits or characteristics, or maybe it's because they know someone like that. Well, they may not be perfect in everything, but they certainly will put the effort in and make sure they get the best results. So that's one way of looking at it. But, again, talking back to the customers, does that make sense when I'm talking about how their emotions and when they buy from some businesses?
It does. It is personal at the end of the day. I remember hearing ages ago, somebody says, someone says, oh, it's not personal. Business is not personal. No, it is. It's very, very personal. It has to be, because you're talking to a person. And that we are emotionally driven animals. And if somebody is going, well, no, show me the numbers. I need to see the spreadsheet. I want to have case studies. I need that proof. Just think why. Because they want to be safe in their decision. They want to take the risk away. They don't want to feel that what they're doing is putting themselves in danger. And senior person, big decision, that could be putting a whole bunch of other people in there. That's why they're asking for this stuff. It does boil down to emotion. If you can work that out, and that's why they're asking this stuff. Yeah, and then you can adjust communication style accordingly. Yeah, that's what that stuff means, I think.
Yeah. And to echo that,
it's not don't be their best mate. That's what it gets translated into badly. Oh, no, it's emotional. I bet they're gonna have to love me then. Well, careful with that
one. No, I mean, yes, you definitely want to build candor and trust and likability. Of course you do. You want to work with a good customer. They want to work with a good business, etc. But you're right on the emotions there. The two main emotions we experience and base our decisions on, or at least a lot of our behaviors on, is either fear, so fear of missing out, FOMO, which a lot of people have probably heard of, or happiness. So most people in business probably will go on the FOMO factor, either that they've had bad experiences in the past and that they certainly don't want to make them again. So they're very calculated in their decision, where they will look at evidence based on, okay, so is this the right decision to make? Happiness, I would deem, comes from actually case studies, which is what you said. So you can use logic and strategy to win business. It's about what your customers say about you rather than what you say about yourself. Absolutely. It's your reviews, your recommendations, your case studies and testimonials. If you can provide evidence of that during the sales cycle or the customer buy-in experience, then they may resonate a very real experience with that other customer, maybe having the same problems that need solving, or maybe having the same challenges that they've experienced. And if you can demonstrate how you've worked with them, resolved it, what the impact and outcome was, then that's an emotional buy-in response that they would probably want to work with you as well.
So tell them a story then, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, storytelling.
No, but for me it is. And you're doing some training, I know, straight after this podcast. I don't know what the subject is, but just if you've got an excuse to do this little experiment, do it. Yeah. Say, particularly if you're doing it virtual, say, can everybody be honest with me and type into chat, as a salesperson, what's the first word that comes into your head when I ask you to write a case study? It's quite funny if you've got good rapport with the group, the stuff that'll come back. Usually it's, shall we say, some of those words are not broadcastable. It doesn't fill people with excitement. Yeah. Okay, we won't do that then. Slightly later in the training, give it a piece of work. Tell you what, can you tell me a story about the best sale you've ever done? They will be jumping all over telling you that. So basically, you just told me a case study. Just reframing that. And it's stories, but there's more to it than that. Why are stories so important in selling?
Yeah, and the reason is because it's a real life experience. I mean, we could use things like analogies, or we could use, similes, or whatever, all these different types of language techniques. But if you can provide a real life example of something that actually happened, what the challenge was, what the process needed to be done, what the outcome was, what the future impact is, that really resonates with people's emotions, because it is an actual, it's an example of, like I said, what they may have experienced, or at least think or fear of going to experience. And that's why storytelling is really powerful and actually retained in memory better than just information sharing. I mean, in the chapter of the book, you mentioned Psychology of Selling, which me and Jim worked on. There are, like, from Dale Egger's Cone of Learning, you retain information from a learning experience in these categories. So 10% learned via reading, 20% via hearing, 30% via seeing, and actually 90% by doing practical activities. So basically is talking about, especially if you're in some sort of training capacity, that your attendees or your delegates are going to learn more information by actually doing practical activities. So it may be role plays, which everybody loves, or it may be group activities where they're collaborating on a task together. They're more likely to remember and retain that information that's learnt in that type of way. But what's the practical implication in a business sense? So obviously you can't go to, say, your client in a face-to-face meeting, or even virtual now, let's do an activity. But you can use other sort of psychological techniques just by getting them to do something. So it might be that if you were, say, having a video conference meeting, you could both work on a whiteboard together, a virtual whiteboard, and you could get them to input. If you were going to do a presentation, or even a webinar, you need to make it quite engaging, interactive, where people are commenting in the messaging bar, or there's loads of videos and pictures and discussions and activities. In person, it's a lot more easier. You can actually move up, work with someone, talk to them, move around. Same with your client. You could show them products. You could even go for a walk to get a coffee. Just stuff like that can really change the environment on how you feel with someone. And actually, written information is retained 70% of the time while it's written down. So it might even be along the lines of, you probably heard this before, you can get someone to provisionally sign something. Now, it might not be signing the contract, but even the action and the thought process of, provisionally signing something really sticks in with their decision making, to say that actually I am on the way now to buy in with that individual. So there are various techniques, like you said, you need to tweak your sales approach when working with different individuals.
Yeah, I think, you give us a really good list there, but the virtual whiteboard, as far as I can tell, that is vastly underused, and it's so powerful. And for me, I kind of use it. There's different ways in which you can just show people stuff. Yeah, great. But if you're saying, ask the question and then typing up live their answers, they are creating the slide. They're creating the whiteboard with you. That's theirs, which you can then send off afterwards. But that's co-creation at its simplest level. But as you say, if you can then get them drawing or writing or typing or adding in, on different sides of the world, but that stuff in front of us is what we've done together. There's a huge amount of psychology in that in itself, isn't there? Apart from just the retention and the fact you're seeing it, we've created that together. That's ours. That doesn't exist anywhere else. That's as a result of this stuff that we've been doing.
Yeah, I suppose you've got to look at it again, talking about emotional buy-in. It's not you're telling someone what to do, it's that they've come up with that with you. So it shows that they have that sense of control still, because when we are parting with money, we do like to feel we're in control of our finances. Of course you do, in transactional selling, but you are basically working with them with the common goal of, obviously, you want to win the business, but they want to feel that they've gone through the steps with you to create, what needs to be done to, make their business more successful. So you're absolutely right. It's a collaborative approach, which you can then, which the future customer can look back on and think, like, I was a hand in that. And, then also they'll feel other emotions, like, obviously, when it is successful, that they were a key part of that. I'm responsible for it as well.
So, said it's vastly underused, and you're kind of nodding away vigorously. People watching this, they'll see that. But why do you think it is? Why aren't people doing that if it is so powerful? What's stopping us?
There's nothing stopping us, but I think
oh, the answer of a true psychologist.
yeah, it's
Why
not.
don't people do it then?
True.
Better
It's
question,
not,
Fred.
it's not a can't. It's a won't, and I don't even want to say the word won't. You know, it's probably not grammatically correct anyway. What it is that we are, you know, we are habitual humans, creatures, basically. So, you know, we are used to doing things in a certain way, probably because we feel comfortable in the way we do our, let's just talk about sales pitching. We feel comfortable in the way we do our sales pitch. As you can tell, I talk, you know, quite a you know, fast pace. That's just generally me. And the more people know me, they understand that. But in another sense, some people could see that as a nervous factor. But you wouldn't know that until you actually have that interaction with someone a few times. So you have to be yourself. And although we do talk about the renowned term of mirroring, you can only mirror to a certain extent, you know, but you can't not be who you are, because you'll lose your credibility and authenticity anyway. So you have to be true to you. But so you are the person you are. The way you do it is probably what you feel you're best at, or what's worked. You know, don't reinvent the wheel. If it's working for you, great. Or feel comfortable in the way you do it. But what you've then got to realize is, as we talked throughout, it does have to be adapted to people's, you know, different communication styles, individual differences, the way they think and feel, the way they retrieve information, and obviously more important is how they want to be communicated with. So in adapting your style, why is it so challenging? I think it's because it's the fear factor, you know, it's the fear that if you do something differently, will you win the business? Of course, it's like you do need to try A/B testing. You do need to try things sometime to see if it has worked. And, you know, if it doesn't work, I think that's kind of a better indication of that what you was doing before actually worked anyway. So you have to test it. There has to be some sort of testing in your approach. So yeah, it's I would say for sales people, you know, specifically, it's maybe just re-educating them. Like, you know, you talked about one of your books, you've written a sort of a book, a new book, because the sales environment, the business environment is currently changing all the time, and we need to go with that change. We might not want to, but we need to. So for example, in sales, you know, digital selling using obviously like LinkedIn is primarily one of the channels, or, you know, looking at more advertising, directing traffic to your website, looking at, you know, SEO optimization, looking at other various types of digital selling and email marketing. That's a really big buoyant sales approach right now, because obviously due to the pandemic, you know, face-to-face selling, you know, was very limited. You know, people maybe weren't responding to answering the phones because either they wasn't in work or they wasn't in the office or whatever it may be. So we had to adapt our sales approach, which is why I adapted my model to focus on LinkedIn, because that's you know, one of the biggest platforms right now for business to business selling. So we do need to be adaptable. We do need to try something new, and not be afraid to try that with different customers as well. And what's your sort of thoughts on that, Fred? Some experiences in, obviously, from, you know, the new book you've written as well?
Yeah, I mean, just go back to that particular one about why people aren't using the collaborative techniques they can use on screen so well. I think some of it is technique, as in knowing physically how to do that and the confidence in doing it, which is a practice thing. But I think something goes back to what's kind of been around in sales forever, which is that when I'm a salesperson, I've got to tell people stuff. That's what I do. I give information. You don't pull it out of people, you tell them. I'm going to show how expert I am. And actually, it's kind of almost, the more I find, the more new, the more novice the salesperson, the more they feel as though they have to tell stuff to prove themselves. It's when people kind of, well, I know the answer, you don't know the answer, but the point is I'm helping you understand the answer. They will do a better job. It's just that you can do that. You can do it so effectively virtually. But again, the people who would jump up and you've got a whiteboard behind you would jump up and say, hey, can I borrow your whiteboard?
Yeah.
They would probably be doing it online. Yeah. But honestly, it's something that I would say, if people are listening to this, they can get their head around doing it, have a practice with a colleague, you will stand out. And it doesn't need to be neat. It doesn't need to be perfect. Everyone knows that when somebody's over your shoulder and you're trying to type something, you can't type. But that's what happens on the screen. But you just make a joke of it. But the feeling that we're putting this stuff in together, it can have a huge impact.
Well, you'll see in the book, communication is actually mostly 7% verbal, so the language we speak, 38% tone and pitch of voice, and 55% body language. So literally, to echo what you said there, Fred, you know, if if it's not about really, what you say and the how much you say, it's really about how you control what you say and clarify, check understanding of with the customer or the prospect you are pitching to, gain their level of trust and their emotional buy-in. But more importantly, when you're looking at body language, you can use interactive techniques, like you said, at the virtual whiteboard, and you could both collaborate on that together. I tend to talk with my hands, it's just a natural thing I do, but also it grasp people attention, so body language and tone of pitch of voice are very powerful. And if you haven't experienced that, then definitely learn it in the sales role. It's really important.
I've never thought of it like this before. You've just given me an aha. It's because you're a trainer. Yeah, you probably, the way you're asking me questions, you'll be asking me what I learned from the podcast anyway at the end. I'm picking up on that one.
That's my follow-up email.
No, but the aha is actually, we're talking about digital body language. And that isn't just the language you are using virtually, as in, have you got your screen set right so people can see your hands, etc. But it's the putting that thing up there that we are going to write on together. That is kind of this digital and this virtual extension of yourself. Whoa, Fred, that's deep. That's why I should practice stuff before I start saying it. No, but yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I imagine I'm mind reading. That's also a really bad habit. But I'm imagining that people who are listening to this are thinking, oh, he said something about LinkedIn. Fred, go down the LinkedIn route, please. He said he's got 10 steps. He said he's got some ways of making that working. Get those out of him. And also, I want to know myself. So can you give us a little bit more around that? Because, yeah, it's very current. And again, lots of people are on it, but almost might as well not be.
Yeah, it's big market at this moment in time. It's a very noisy place. Since the pandemic, it actually went up 2,000% in traffic, but it is the #1 business-to-business channel. I looked at some stats, and 2021, there were 30 million businesses. And by the end of 2021, early 2022, we're looking at now 55 million companies, businesses. That's an increase of 25 million. It's incredible. It just shows how powerful LinkedIn is now. And firstly, if you're on it, if you're not using it, you are certainly missing a trick and you're a way to approach your future customers. But secondly, if you are on it but not knowing how to use it effectively, or optimizing your settings, building that consistency and that brand and that messaging, then you will be overlooked by your competitors. I will pick up on something you said there, Fred, about assumption. Never assume.
It was worse than assumption. It was mind reading. That's worse.
That's very true. But yeah, you've really got to gather that evidence. And the great thing about LinkedIn, first of all, as a starting point, is it's a research hub. It's incredible. I won't have a conversation. Actually, Fred, you'd probably noticed this before we went on the podcast today. I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and that's what I do. And I'm surprised if most people in business or salespeople don't actually do that. So first of all, you can understand, who the person is, what their business is like, maybe their background. Do you have any common ground? Do you have any synergy? Do you have similar interests? Are you supporting the same charity? Do you follow the same influencers? What's going on in their business world? Have they won awards? Have they got a new product? Have they been promoted? Have they got a new branch location or a new team member? Whatever it may be, that's how to turn a cold call into a warm conversation. Using LinkedIn, find out the research about your individual prospect, your future customer, I call them. And as soon as you interact with them, whether that might be by phone, whether it might be a LinkedIn private message or an email, whatever it may be, you've really armed yourself with some insights into building a rapport with them. And it's the sooner you get that on into a conversation, the more likely they are to speak with you and listen to you, because you've taken the time, not just to go after anyone. You've taken the time to really contact that person for a certain reason. So that's the first starting point that you should be using LinkedIn for is research. More importantly,
Sorry, just before you go on to the second one, I want to add a bit in here, is that one of the things, and you probably hear this, is when people say, yeah, but won't it look a bit weird that I've looked at them before I speak to them? They'll see, won't they, that I've had a look at their profile. What's your answer to that? Yeah, exactly. Good. It's weird that you haven't. Yeah, you've got a meeting with me and you've not researched me. You know what? I've tuned out before you've even connect
Yeah.
with me, I'm thinking,
I'll,
where's this
I'll,
going?
I'll give an example. Probably, I wouldn't have probably said this to my bosses at the time, but sometimes when I was on the way to on the train to go to a client pitch in recruitment, I wouldn't necessarily research that much about the business. But what I would do is research them on LinkedIn. When I start that conversation with them about, talking about, what I found out about them, and we've got a really good conversation, all I had to then do was ask the questions, and they would answer and they would speak, because we've built the rapport. I'm not saying to everyone do that, by the way. Do your research on the business. But it's just to give you an example of how it's more important to a person to be recognized as an individual, not just for the company. So anyway.
Right, so LinkedIn's a research hub, that's one. Sorry to interrupt. You're on a float. Number 2.
Yes, I'm actually going to put this at 0.5. Even before you research people on LinkedIn, you do need to have an all-star LinkedIn profile. So your profile needs to be updated as soon as possible. And the reason why I put that before researching your prospect is because basically, if you research them and then they go back and research you and they can't see much information about you, then it's pointless. You have to demonstrate your authenticity, your credibility, you being an expert in your field. What does your business do? Who does it work with? What are your customers saying about you? It has to be examples of figures and statistics and achievements and outcomes. It can't just be all like factual based. You really got to get that emotion going. So you need an all-star profile. Obviously, due to the time of this podcast, I can't go through every element of it. But if anyone does want to work with me afterwards, then you can contact me on LinkedIn. But anyway, so you'll
but get your profile sorted first. Oh no, that's why I want to contact you. Oh no, chicken and egg.
Absolutely. So you need an all-star LinkedIn profile. You do your research of your prospects on LinkedIn. Use the business ecosystem. So this is definitely a top tip from Jamie today. Say you're working with a customer. Okay, who's that customer networked with? What similar businesses to them? Who is similar to that customer? Who are they giving testimonials to? Who are they liking and commenting on social media posts? Then you need to research that person they're doing that activity with, and then you might want to connect with them or build a relationship with them, because they could be your future customer. Not only that, during the buying cycle with the new customer, oh, by the way, we have a mutual connection of whoever that person was. So you've already got a referral, or you could even ask that person to send a referral over. So it's really, really powerful in searching for your future customers. Right, so to move on, the final 2 steps of what I deem is, what you need to be successful on LinkedIn. We've got an all-star LinkedIn profile, how to search effectively, and using LinkedIn to find your prospects, and using groups also to do that. Social media marketing is the other stage, so I would call that stage 3. You need to be doing consistent social media marketing. This could be a range of posting, it could be a range of polls, videos. People like to put a visual to a name, and don't forget to, if you're going to do a video, don't forget to add text to that, because not everyone will listen to auditory. They may be on a train, or they may not be listening when they should be watching it, etc. So make sure you have some text as well. So there are various different techniques when you are doing certain types of posting. But anyway, even written content, do definitely some storytelling, make it engaging, make it thought leadership, ask the questions. It's not just, great, this is what I'm doing. It's got to be something that the market wants to hear. So what's happening in your industry? What's happening in your same size business? What's happening in your geographical location? That's really going to have an impact into people and what they really want to read. That's why, some people say to me, well, do I write really long posts? Shorter posts would be better, surely, for attention, as you mentioned. Yes. But if you've got a really compelling story, a really emotional story, people will read that, and there'll be a lot of responses to that. And then the final stage is my 10-step
Sorry,
framework.
one quick one in there.
Oh, absolutely.
Pictures of cats?
Depends on the topic area. I mean, if you get to Friday and you want to show a bit more about your personality, there's nothing wrong with doing a personal post or an emotional post. It does work. People do want to see you as an individual. It's not all business, but yes, it's got to be a time and a place. You'll actually find some, humor works. So if you can put a cat in a humorous way, then that's absolutely fine, Fred. I look forward to seeing the post of your cat.
It's usually next to my book. Oh, 2 birds with 1 stone. That's a masterclass. That's level. That's ninja stuff.
And I'll finish. I'll finish off with. No, it's possible, hilarious. The 10-step framework is basically a framework I've created from connecting with someone all the way through all the stages you need to take with them to engage, build rapport, and then you go in for the meeting, the virtual meeting or the face-to-face meeting or the phone conversation. There wouldn't be a transactional sale really in a private message. You've got to do these 10 steps to get to where you want to get to. But once you've got to that stage, You've already built rapport using LinkedIn. You've already got the knowledge of that person using LinkedIn. Then you've really helped probably 3 or 4, 5 stages even of that sales cycle by just doing that sort of framework. And then it really helps to convert. So we'd be looking at higher conversion rates by using LinkedIn would be the main goal of that.
Brilliant stuff. No, look, and you do speak fast, and I know you're speeding up because
Yes.
I was rude and moved the timings of recording, and you have training afterwards. So you need to go and have a cup of tea and then get yourself set for doing it. But you have shared so much. I mean, even just that the piece on LinkedIn, you know, and adding an extra little half section before. And I think one thing I wanted to mention was when you talked about all-star profile, that isn't Jamie language, is it? That's LinkedIn language.
LinkedIn language,
where it will guide you through do these things. LinkedIn wants you to use it well.
Yeah, they want you to be an active user. They prioritize that probably because you're more on there and being active, but it's like a checklist of what you need to do on your profile, but they guide you through that, or you can get support with that as well. But Fred, I really enjoyed the conversation.
No, let me ask a really obvious question though. So where can people connect with you, Jamie?
Absolutely on LinkedIn.
Oh, Kel surprise.
I'm going to be different as a sales trainer and do something different and give out my phone number because we do want to talk on the phone. You know, that's the best way of building relationships, at least in the initial stages. So anyone can contact me on 075 99 33 2178. I did slow down there using my tone and pitch of voice. So remember that throughout the conversation.
No, super, mate. And that is on 24/7, people. So if ever you're using LinkedIn at midnight and you want to be... No, look, Jamie, I know you need to bounce. Thank you so much. I mean, you've been very, very generous in what you shared there. We will pop those connections details into the show notes. I know. We will be talking again soon, I know.
Brilliant. Many thanks, Fred.
Pleasure, Jamie. Cheers.